Hi, welcome to A Sparkling Vintage Life, where we talk about all things vintage and celebrate the grace and charm of an earlier era. I'm your host, Jennifer Leo. I write historical fiction as Jennifer Lamont Leo, and if you've ever read my fiction, you'll know that I have a special affinity for the early 20th century, but I actually like to learn about all time periods of history. Today's episode is an introduction where I'll tell you a little bit about myself and also talk to you about why I wanted to start this project of celebrating the past. Although I'm very much a 21st century woman, I've always been drawn to the past ever since childhood. I think it probably started with the Little House books and Anne of Green Gables and the Betsy Tacy books. These were already sort of antique by the time I was reading them, and I just loved reading about the olden days. As an adult, I really appreciate novels like Mrs. Miniver. Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier is one of my favorites. So I'm just really drawn to earlier eras. I love cameo pins and strings of pearls. I wish ladies still wore hats and white gloves. I'd love to plant a victory garden and dance to swing music and do the Charleston. I suppose my very favorite era would span from, say, the Edwardian era through World War II. I do appreciate other time periods as well, though. I love reading historical fiction, and as I mentioned earlier, I do write it as well. But I love novels that were not historical fiction at the time they were written, even though they seem old-fashioned to us now. I'm thinking of authors like Agatha Christie and Daphne du Maurier. By the way, in my world, calling something old-fashioned is high praise. I love to read nonfiction as well. I like history and biography. I even like vintage magazines. I love vintage magazines. So is this video and podcast project for readers? Well, yes and no. I am an avid reader, and just about everything I know about the past has come from reading books. But I'll also be discussing movies and TV and trends and fashion and culture. So no, this isn't a project strictly for readers, although if you appreciate old-fashioned things and you find yourself yearning for a slower, simpler life, even with rose-colored glasses firmly in place, this channel is for you. Speaking of rose-colored glasses, we can all think of plenty of negative things to say about the past. Things we wish had never happened, societal ills, behavioral problems, outdated attitudes that we want to stay firmly in the past. But there are other aspects that I think would be useful today and worth bringing back and at least learning about. So let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater, as the old saying goes. I'm all about bringing back things having to do with grace and charm and kindness and courage and elegance and neighborliness and dignity, all those positive values that are civilized and God-honoring. Now, a few more things you should know about me. This is not a podcast about religion, but I am a Christian, and so I speak and write from that perspective. I'm also a wife, a novelist, a copywriter, and an editor. I grew up in Illinois, and now I live in the beautiful mountains of northern Idaho. I live live with my husband, 2 cats, and abundant wildlife. It's the best place to write that I think exists. I enjoy playing piano, and I sing my heart out in the shower, and I'm sure we'll get better acquainted as time goes on. But for now, if you too are interested in celebrating the best of the past, come join me on A Sparkling Vintage Life. There is a podcast, and I'll link to that down below. And then occasionally I'll be doing videos like this one. I prefer podcasts. I'm not that crazy about doing video, but we'll see. It's all a big experiment. At the end of each episode, I'll be offering a grace note. This will be an idea or a resource or a recommendation for you to try out. Today's grace note is for you fiction lovers out there. As I said earlier, the podcast isn't just for readers, but if you do enjoy fiction, I invite you to check out my Facebook group called The Sparkling Vintage Ladies Reading Circle. I'll link to that below as well. And yes, it's just for the ladies. We read and discuss fiction, mainly written and or set in the early 20th century. My goal is to have a book a month, but lately that hasn't worked out too well. We've had a long span between books, but I plan to try to rectify that going forward. So come check us out. And if that sounds like your cup of tea, a porcelain cup, of course, with a slice of lemon, then come check us out. I'll put the link in down below, and you can also visit me at sparklingvintagelife.com/podcast, or just jenniferlamontleo.com, which will tell you all about my author life and my books and things like that. Okay, that's it for now. Thank you for watching, and come back soon when I'll be discussing another aspect of A Sparkling Vintage Life.